So, what's up, guys? When is the best time to speak about past experiences that you feel needs lots of experience? So, I talk about continuing on a lot because no matter how bad things get, there will always be a new day. Uh-huh. New day. But I've also had certain epiphany moments that I felt like I should have talked about in the past because it was set up for me very nicely. But there was this thought process that made me think otherwise. I think a lot of me thought down the road when I'm a little bit wiser, when I'm a little bit more in tune, when I'm grown a little bit more, when when I actually realize what these blessings mean even more, then I'll actually be able to speak about it. Um, Perhaps it was the fact that yeah, the platform isn't the best because shoot, man, I just feel like this is a podcast. But let me just speak to you this way. I think the tumultuous part is speaking for others. This is the responsibility of being almost a teacher in that fact, where you try to regard all forms of all perspectives. Um, it's almost balancing the idea of giving someone the route of not neutrality, but leading them along the path that you know the person you're speaking to will have a beautiful future, a very beautiful future. So while one believes wisdom and teachings, may carry over properly, I know that the way my life is, things will filter where the priorities of life will adjust accordingly what I will speak to you. So it's kind of like the idea that you've been through all these life experiences, and so you're gonna say, hey, look, there's this thought process in my idea that I should say, but maybe I shouldn't. Um, and then there's a subject that is willing, and then there's a subject to knowing that there is gravity towards it. That is an improper case of right now, that's going on in the world, um, that may have an understanding on your heart too, um, that may actually have some particular, maybe it's a pull, maybe it's a feeling that you get that you need to address. Um, it's much like a conversation when you're speaking to somebody and somebody asks you like, what's your most favorite thing to do? What's your most I don't know. The question's kind of hard to give an example, but when you're trying to explain something and you have multiple points through your experience, whether you may think it or not, your answer most likely, unless if you're going off the opposite end or if you're not explaining yourself how you truly feel, that's another story. But if that comes to light, then that's gonna be as is gonna it's almost the thought process is almost gonna become priority as far as your mind is letting you know. Um, and to a certain point, it may be a escape because I don't think it's wrong to think that you're trying to tell your own form of perspective, but I do think it is very endearing when you're trying to say that this is who I am, and then this is trying to be accompanied with the fact that I have maybe this background, I have this illustration that I want to tell you because I've been through it, and so that experience is a mold almost, or maybe it's it's kind of like an etching in your DNA that is gonna allow you to represent how you truly feel. Which that is the reason why I kind of hesitated because it's like, yo, when you have an answer to a question and there are nine answers to that question, but you feel like one, two, and three is a really good way of saying that answer, and you also think that four, five, and six is a really good way of saying that answer, but you want to say seven, eight, and nine. But it's like that 7, 8, and 9 perspective is completely different from 1 through 6. And so it's going to lead you on another path that is going to almost sound like you're trying to say something a little bit more different when it's all the same answer at the same time. I'm getting kind of abstract on that one too, but that's just how I feel about when I speak. When I speak, I feel like, yeah, I do have these different diverse answers. And so I try to pinpoint, hey, which one is the most um, applicable for someone on the other side to say, hey, look, that makes sense. But I realize, you know what? It's just for me to get it out there, and whatever works, works. And then that kind of whole thought process is, yes, there's a whole bunch of different answers out there anyway. So I don't really have to stress about that too. So it's like, okay, now you're going to have, just like I was kind of talking about in my previous videos, it's like you're going to have these freedom of choices to say which one you want to go about with those answers, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call them, perspectives. And then you go, now you have this choice of saying, is how I presented it the way it should be? Um, which I still think is very relevant right now. And I think it's really relevant for me personally. I think it's really relevant for how I think, what my beliefs are, my faith is centralized in. So yeah, that's, I mean, me trying to say one thing is very difficult. Speaking about one word is very difficult. So it's like me speaking about life lessons. Like for me, I know this, that it's a lot easier for me to go one on one, speak to somebody one on one, and for me to understand who you are if I'm face to face with you. Um, and like, the whole process is like two or three heads is better than one. And then if you could come up with these really good ideas and speak about it in your form of communication, back forth, back and forth, back and forth, then things become even brighter. So you want to continually build off such things. Like, it's not the fact that you will be wrong, it's the fact that there are many different ways of conclusive evidence, conclusive ideas, and that, you know, things will come about as you go. Because the way I see it, I felt like in certain times, I mean, even freaking Marvel did a whole movie about it, but it's like there will be an end to a certain thing. But even once you come to a certain point and you're assured that, this end is your end, and after all of that practice, after all of that battling, after all of that patience, whatever it is that you've been through, which is a lot, a lot of time, a lot of conceptual basis, that you're gonna be like, man, like, this is the end. But it's not, and it's never gonna be the end, because for me at least, it's eternal. Like, so you're gonna have your end, and then you're gonna have a new beginning, and then you're gonna constantly go through it. That's why I talk about blank canvases, is because I think the appreciation now for me especially is the fact that, where's my feeling at? Where is this mana and chi, and where is this going, and how does it feel for me? It's out the roof still. So it's like, how can I speak about that? I'm just trying to piece it all together as much as other people have, because I think they're speaking to somebody. um and I think they're speaking about the genuineness of that side, and that one person should definitely develop good causes and good direction, and perhaps they don't speak too much, and perhaps they don't address it how the mainstream is. Me, yeah, I'm trying to address it in every kind of way: mainstream, alternative, projection, abstract, reality based, um, time versus time, with time, God, secular, God, atheism, God, closeness, God, Jesus Christ. So those things, like, it becomes a difficult process, but man, I'm interested in this probably the most. So, like, let me continue. Um, there are a constant amount of emotions, information, energy that garner your attention, like I was speaking about before. So in the course of being able to live in a peaceful mind state, which I hope we're all doing, or which I hope the people that are listening to me are really about, where where will newfound knowledge come from? Because in information age that we live in right now, 2020, I think people are always looking for newfound information. Um, Sometimes it's for worse reason, but for majority of the reason, I could say it's it's a really good bit. It's a really, really good bit whenever you get newfound information. It's just, when you, I think really good people that are in a process right now, newfound information could be so tiny, but it could be, it could do so much for one person. So does it come from history? Does it arise from the most pinnacle events of your life and to those around you? Or how about the buildup of an ever so patient man or woman that thrives in appreciation and perhaps depreciation, but in appreciation? Like your choice of realizing that, this knowledge doesn't have to quite necessarily be something that, is the new future, but that's what's at stake and that's what's going to happen. And so it's like, okay, now where can we get what the truth is? When I know my truth started, well, when my truth became the highest, about 2,000 years ago. Like, to me, I feel like you could find the truth in time, and I find that you could find the truth or newfound knowledge in combining all these situations and then combining it in your actions and then realizing, oh man, I'm not even that. You start getting humbled more. But then there's extremities, right? The extremity is, you should stay humble because, you know, it's like that small. You're that small for God. You're that small for, or if you want to put in the man way, you're that small for somebody that if you make $15, $30 an hour, you're that small for somebody that makes $10,000 an hour, $100,000 an hour, whatever. I mean, that's in the worldly way, but you know what I'm saying? So it's like, to God, you're that small. But to God, you're that big. You know what I mean? So it's like the extremity is that it's like really small, really, really small. But yet at the same time, it's huge. So how can you key on the time and the scale? How can you key on in the let's see here. I said time. I said scale. How can you key on the diverse lives that you come across? How can you key on the ability to understand things that no one ever has and to commit yourself in that way with almost a mystery that isn't so much that anybody could really explain to you unless if you've been through it as well. Newfound knowledge come from anywhere, come from your work, however much daily living that you go through. Um, what can you be a part of? Um, so where does my backbone stem for me to speak like this? I'm being very, very general, almost very vague, almost pinpointing to a certain extent. Um, and even me, I'm not bitter to all the things that I wanted to say that that have been said or that have been done or the ideas that have been made into fruition. Like, yeah, it's about the whole thought process is if you can get over that bitterness and remain in truth. Um, because once you do that, I do think God's gonna look at you and be like, okay, you got that. You know that. It's time for you to grow even more. Um, so to answer that question, very simply plain, to me it's the Holy Bible. It's the brown book, the good book. Um, no matter how far I've gone away from it in my rebellious stage, no matter how much I sinned, no matter how much I um, grew up on it and I wasn't aware of the things that I was doing in a good way, which is pretty cool, actually, really, really cool. But doing things that, or understanding the verses even more clearly or with even better experience. I mean, for all as I know, for all that I could know, heck, I don't even have to be a Christian to know what's good and what's bad. Um, but then once you get to like once you have that ground foundation, it's you're gonna have a composed composed portion that can actually have it that whatever choice of living that you go upon, um, there can always be recommendations that help you become closer to the truth. Um, so, I mean, the good book is actually a culmination of stories. Like if you put it, I like to give these perspectives because I think they give perspective on how to approach something completely different. Um, so I actually like to think the Bible is a combination of stories, projections, perspectives, and testimonies all wrapped into one. So maybe people are turned off by it because it's like it's God and all it's a life story, and maybe there's a lot of reasons why people would be turned off by Christianity, um, but it's it's a whole bunch of stories that are put together that aren't really stories that some may not even think are really connected, but you know, so that simple-minded person might actually find to be difficult to piece all these together. Is the narrative is really all over the place. To a certain extent. For it's very clear and straightforward, very clear and very straightforward for many of instances. But at the same time, it's like, whoa, there's a lot. There's a lot. Um, but perhaps it is the simple that can determine the true meaning of this book. That overcomes the wisest. It is that simple person. Um, so, but I was graced unbelievably that I had to reciprocate. You know, every, after going through the good book, so much, and after realizing how true it is, um, I just felt like I had to reciprocate, I had to match it in some way because that was where my appreciation lied, and so I written my own short story that I felt I gave my all into as well. Um, Speaking about this prioritization, like getting a summarization of what I felt like could be the future, what should be done right now. Um, trying to build stories off a positive attitude that doesn't recommend any evil or unnecessary weight that is not light. Um, and they understanding, that this difficult rationales and the summarization is of such immense and wide-reaching verses. Like some of these verses are one sentence. They could change a person's life, but the verse is so general. It's so general, but at the same time, it could be so precise. Um, and so I think that's the power of words. The power of words is, and of the word, is that you may need something, and depending on how true you are with yourself, it could be exactly what you need at that very given moment. Um, and so, it takes on a good mold for me. I think that has represented everything that I felt like, could be that could be part of me without even having to say that I'm a Christian. That's how deep it is. Um, so the more perspective I think of it, like God had it out for billions and trillions of souls to speak in the span of millenniums. It's just like, there's a whole bunch of people within a whole bunch of time range. He knew this. God knew this. He or she, God knew this, and and you know, he still was writing those words. He was writing those sentences. And it wasn't him, it was disciples, his kings, his prophets, his people, regular people living, regular, just good old people, that he found a light in. I'm not to say I'm perfect, but in today's day and age, I could easily choose somebody that I've seen the good light in, as opposed to somebody that, I don't know, may have it all and that just that concerns themselves pretty perfectly, but that doesn't really, but at that same token, I'm pretty proud of those people too. I'm really proud of those people. So it's like, I don't know, for that fact, I would say that's what love does. It encompasses all. Um, so it's like, wouldn't you want to? Well, like, let me continue. Like, what would be said about the entire human soul? Because I think that's what God's speaking to, is just the saving grace. And so, like, what would be in that entirety? Wouldn't you want to learn more about that human soul? Um, I mean, my dad has told me not to, at times, not to think in such a manner, not to be so general and to think about so many people at once, and to, just consider more carefully about what should be done individually. I mean, although, like, what is appreciation? I mean, what appreciation falters in understanding how well the human soul lives out its life? That's what I would say to that, and I think that's something that I think would be a progress towards what God will want. And that's, I think, you know, it's a lot of fine line details. No, it's a lot of consistency involved, that will go about change that I think needs to be a factor, because, like, so much could happen within one night, one day, um, in lieu of the good light, because you could realize so much, you could feel so much, you could understand so much. But then that difficult part is the time part. How long can you go with that? Do you forget, you know, and then all the other negative stuff like starts coming in. But uh, you know, if one had more to do, wouldn't it be done already? Is a question that I pose. Um, but it is kind of like saying the same thing that I already said. This perspective is another one that I've spoken about already, but it's difficult to explain as well because people need help all over the place. So I just say, hey, look, the more good stuff is out there, as opposed to the negligent, the bad, the evil, and the manipulating. And I'll really live with the results, no matter what happens to me. Because yeah, that's it. That's, it's something that I feel like is something could be representing how these, uh anything could stem from a good light. Anything could stem from the goodness of a human soul. Um, and it's in those particular chances, choices, deliverables, indicators that make people go and choose their life accordingly. But you know, I would really want it for the good stuff to be out there, no matter what, no matter the credit, no matter the opposition, no matter the um, no matter the communication that is involved. Um, it's always knowing what you're a part of, because you have to be fully aware of what you're diving yourself into. Um, and that could cause a lot of things to make you drown and stuff, but um, that's also part of life. But it's like you gotta know what you're a part of, and you gotta know um, where you really abide yourself in. Um, Assurance can be so close to confidence, but assurance adds to confidence. So assurance is confidence is knowing it has been done already. Like, job is done. It's been done, um, and that's the assurance that I like for you to keep, um, because that's something that I tell myself too. I gotta remember. I gotta remember these things. I gotta remember these things that I've been through. I really gotta live and understand the things that I've gone through. But it's hard to remember that. And sometimes I try to put it on assurance that that's the way it is, and so I can't look back. Um, and hopefully that's the same message that you can get too. So you, yeah, go live your life.